live. Hello,
Or
world.
are we?
Anyway, to continue that conversation, I prefer motion array, but that's partially because I do have all of the Adobe stuff and do all of my editing in Premiere Pro and such.
Yep.
So that's what I do, but I've done a lot of like fairly big video editing projects in it, so I've learned all the things. Hi Blake, and even have like a whole screen on my Stream Deck that's designed for all the shortcuts and stuff. So,
All right.
how am I getting my audio back in my ears?
It's not me.
It's got to be there. It is. Found it.
It's that
That was
that
weird.
Roadcaster,
No, I got it
which I
open
almost
elsewhere.
bought, by the way.
Yeah, you saw my thing.
I did. Jerk, costing me money.
Finally, I get to go back the other way.
I haven't done it yet though.
I
So
I
okay, I found one. I found a used one at the local guitar center, and there's like 20 used ones at different guitar centers.
Okay.
And it's $600 new.
Yep.
The used one at my guitar center is $499.
Okay.
The cable came tied in a knot, and plugged it in, made sure it worked, and then I looked at online, and they have like 3 other places where they sell the same thing in great condition.
Yep.
Same listing as this one, for $449. So I asked the person, like, so if you will match your other store, given the fact that this cable is going to go bad at some point, I will buy this one today. And they, well, I'll have to go ask my manager.
Yeah.
He's like, no, we'll just order one from the other store. And I'm like, all right, well, see you later.
Yeah.
And I think they were kind of shocked that I did that. But at that point, I was so annoyed. I'm like, you're kidding me. Like, this is not in great condition, first of all.
Correct.
Because you gave me like a yarn ball for a cable that I had to unravel.
Yep.
And it's going to go bad at some point. Oh yeah, well no, we wouldn't do that. We would just, every store prices their own thing. Well, you priced it wrong. So.
Correct. Yep. Oh, Mike.
Yep. Yep.
I don't know. I'm a pretty big fan. I have gotten to where I even have like the cable sitting here ready to plug in at any time, so that if I get a phone call, I can
Well, that would be great, except my
Done.
phone no longer charges via the Lightning port.
Oh, yeah. That's actually why I got the 13 Pro this last time around, because my old iPhone 10, I couldn't get it to do the wireless charging or the plug-in charging anymore. It's like I'm not dealing with this.
Wireless charging. I have this like wireless battery pack that came with like an SD card that I bought.
Yeah.
So I keep that charged up and then put my phone on that at night.
Yeah.
By the way, Blake, since you're talking about
an expensive
webcams,
rabbit hole,
it sounds like I just bought a new webcam.
What is it? I noticed it.
No, this is actually still the old DSLR, but I think I told you about this. This is not the one that I use for YouTube. That's off to the side, the Blackmagic. This is the 70D.
Oh, right.
Because I needed something closer to the monitor, otherwise it never looks like I'm looking at the person.
Right.
I don't want to have to OBS my computer over to my iPad screen via teleprompter. So, have you heard of the Opal C1?
Opal C1. Yes, I have. Is that Matt Birchler has one?
He does. He's responsible for me paying to get an invite code off of Reddit so I could buy one.
Nice work.
No, it is a webcam. Opalcamera.com, I think, is the website. It's in pre-release now. It's a 4K camera with a really nice sensor and software that allows you to do a whole bunch of crazy things. Like one of the sliders is for bokeh, but it actually looks like it does a pretty decent job.
Yeah.
Based on some of the reviews that I saw. So it's like DSLR quality without the DSLR price tag is kind of how they're pitching it. But it sounds kind of interesting, the stuff that they want to do with the software down the road. Like one of the things they've floated is the ability to watch record basically the words that you say, just like Otter AI or something like that. But at the end, it tells you like these were your filler words or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So like speech coaching and stuff like that via software feature that you could toggle on, which I think is kind of cool. But really, it's just the bokeh that's interesting to me.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a guy I've been back and forth with on Twitter DMs here recently that has a set of software that it has like a video overlay, and it sets like green or red flags on or off depending on if you're looking at the camera or not, or if you're
yep.
too, like if it's too silent and such. Like it has the stuff that you can do to get all of that. The
Yep.
trick is that there are times when I am intentionally looking here, even though the camera is there. That
Mm-hmm.
autofocus went really fast. So I do that intentionally, or sometimes I'm looking down in corners and I'm not even intending to look up at that camera. So I don't know how that would work. Plus, my entire camera gear is off a different computer. It's not even on my Mac. My Mac's not even
Yep.
like when we do all of these streaming things, my Mac doesn't do, I don't think it really does anything. Like I connect to you separately, but as far as like the stream stuff, it doesn't do anything. So it's a completely
Yeah.
different computer, but I don't
Sure.
know. Joe's weird though.
uh, the way I justified it is that the software, because they're trying to cram so many features into it, is actually going to be a subscription.
Oh,
It is
sure.
going to be $4 a month, but it is free if you get in on the beta.
Yeah.
So I'm in on the beta.
There you go. There you go.
It'll be here in 13 to 15 days, according to
And you paid to
FedEx.
get in on the beta though.
It did.
You paid to get it for free.
It hurt. I do want a webcam though, because like this DSLR is fine. But the other day I was in a Zoom call
Mm-hmm.
and someone shared full screen or shared their screen. So it goes full screen right away every time.
Yeah.
It's probably a setting I can change. I didn't though. So it went full screen. I exited full screen. The minute I exited full screen, I could not get Cascable, the thing that this requires to turn it into a webcam, because Canon's webcam doesn't support M1 anything yet, I don't think. It wouldn't bring my camera back.
Okay.
The meeting has started. Like I can't restart my computer, so I had to just open it up and use the FaceTime
Sure.
one. So I don't know, just wonkiness like that. I just need something that I can plug straight in.
Why not just buy a cam link?
This doesn't work with Camlink. Doesn't have clean HDMI out.
Oh.
If it had clean HDMI out, I would just plug it into the A10 Mini and use that. But
Oh. Huh. Okay.
someday I will upgrade that one.
Got it. I'm with you
Till
now.
that day, I have an Opal C1 that at the very least I can resell
Got
because
it.
everybody wants one.
Hi, Allie. I'm a little slow on the chat here. Allie? I assume it's Allie. Maybe it's Ollie. Super fun. Cameras
singing
and gear
the,
and
the
stuff.
Prince Ali song from Aladdin in my head right now.
If you want to get into like ridiculous camera gear setup, right over here on the shelf, I have 3 wireless SDI systems so that you can plug SDI cameras and move the cameras wherever you want and get the signal back into a switcher. And then what else is back here? I've got 18 SDI to HDMI or HDMI to SDI converters. And then I have
Oh my.
what is this thing? It's a 40 by 40. Yeah, it's a 40 by 40 SDI distribution box. So I can take 40 SDI inputs and pick and choose which ones go to 40 SDI outputs. Welcome to ridiculous video structures.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's too much for me. I'm not going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, you get into that, and now you're starting to talk about like how do you do gen locks and reference lines, and how do you make sure all the frames are lined up amongst 6 cameras, and welcome.
Yep.
Welcome to like commercial grade video distribution systems. Yep, super fun. I feel like
Uh,
we should record something today since
yeah, let's make a podcast about. All right, I'm gonna edit this document. You don't have it open, do you?
no, well, I have it open, but I don't have it editing.
Okay. This is so dumb that we can't both edit this at the same time. By episode 150, I feel we should have a different system for this.
I this close, Mike. I was ready to build something in Obsidian to make a live. Actually,
Oh, dude, did you see that you can actually publish and give people access to edit?
no,
We could
I
do
didn't see
that
that.
in Obsidian now. Well, I think it's in beta, the insider builds.
Okay. I ran across something else. I'll use it as a start point here
Okay, that's fine.
because it would not require us to use publish at all.
I don't mind. Oh, by the way, I did start doing publish. What's my thing? Let me look it up quick.
Your shtick, the URL, the URL.
Yeah, I forgot my URL.
URLs are important in the world of internets.
Okay. Why can't I find any of the publish settings? Oh, because it's not in settings. It's actually just in the publish thing. To get to the publish settings, you have to click the publish changes button. And then it loads forever because my Obsidian is ginormous. So in
I feel like that's partly
an
my fault.
undetermined amount of time, I will find this link.
You didn't
Okay,
save
publish
it in
config.
like Text Expander or Alfred or something? That's what I do all the time.
Not yet. Okay, so
I have a whole bank of
here it
things.
is.
Here's pro tip. If you use Text Expander or Alfred snippets and such,
Here it
set
is.
up link dot something and use like shortcuts to spell out, like to give out your most common links. Like I've got one for link.bw to send out the Bookworm link. Link.h gets my joebulig.com, but it has like the HTTPS stuff at the beginning of it too, so it's a lot easier than
Gotcha.
typing it all up. Publish
Uh,
Mike Schmidt. You got Mike Schmitz.
Yeah, I did.
You like never get that.
I know. So this is a little out of date, but in one of my Ship 30 threads, I mentioned the sermon sketch notes stuff, and so I just made this public. And it's not everything, obviously, but it is all my sermon sketch notes up until whatever date. I don't remember. I had to close the window by accident, but
2017.
yeah.
September 2017.
Well, so yeah, that date's not going to change. That's when I started doing the sermon sketch notes digitally, but it goes up until probably like mid-April or something. I haven't updated it the last couple weeks.
April 20th. Gotcha. I'm with you.
But I just decided, because for a while I was like, this would be kind of cool. You can password protect it. So the initial thought was like Patreon or something. People can get access to it, but I'll just let people have it.
Yeah, it's way more fun.
I
to
did
do
sermon
that.
sketch note videos. I can point to this afterwards. People can play around with it. Knock yourself out.
Super fun. Wait, so if you had a publish that was private and then you could both edit it. Now I think I'm get where you're going.
Yeah, the problem is you can't have more than one publish account, I don't think. So I don't know how that works.
I don't have one.
Yeah, but if like you created one for Bookworm, for example, and I have mine, I'm not quite sure how to switch between them other than log out and log in, which is a pain inside of Obsidian.
I don't know.
So
Not something I have thought through. Anyway, there's that.
anyways.
Anywho's.
Podcast time.
Okay.
Wait, audio hijack.
Oh yeah, you have all your things that could break.
I have the hardware one ready to go, but I want to see if audio hijack works. It worked last time. Whoops. Okay. Audio hijack. Show me my sessions. Come on. There we go.
Is Martin
Bookworm.
here? Martin, if you're here, say hi, please.
All right, I'm going to hit run on this in case the audio disappears.
Okay.
Check. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes.
All right, cool. Seems to be working.
Scary. They're getting their bugs
Countdown?
figured out. Oh, I didn't send this tweet thingy. Okay. Now it's out there. Okay. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
found a really cool thing, Mike.
What's that?
Remember how we were talking about like wanting to edit the same document at the same time and how Basecamp is ridiculous and doesn't let us do this?
Yes.
There is an Obsidian plugin that is called Obsidian Multiplayer. Have you seen this?
I haven't.
It,
We were just talking about this, and you were holding off.
I
For the
was
show.
holding off. There is a plugin called Obsidian Multiplayer. I have not had a chance to test it because you are the person I should test this with, and life. And it uses like some backend thing that's open source, that's public and such. And this guy like tied it into Obsidian so that you can take notes within your existing database and share them with other people, and they can edit them live together. I
Love it.
have no idea how well it works. I don't even know if it works, but it sounds cool.
This is the perfect thing for you to spend hours testing.
Yep, that's how this
No,
goes.
I definitely want. I definitely want to try this. So you tell me what to do, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah, I feel like we should at least
Sounds
try this
great.
for the next Bookworm episode.
Done.
Totally should.
Now I will say I hate this name because multiplayer is the term that everybody in the Rome research community would use when I was involved with like the what do they even call it? It's not insider, that's Obsidian. True believer calls or
Sure,
something.
yeah.
They're always like, "Oh, multiplayer's coming. It's going to be a game changer." And I'm like, "I don't want multiplayer.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want my notes."
No, so maybe that's where it came from. I don't know. I didn't know that that was a thing at all. I've not kept up with Rome one iota. However, I found this plugin in the midst of searching for ways to like live edit text files, like collaboratively, and I ran across that plugin. But it's not. It's like barely documented, and it's not shared publicly. Like the only place I found it existing was on GitHub, where you could download the code. Like it's not even in the plugin store from what I can tell. So that's why I'm a bit like, I don't know how well this will work, but is what it is. Super fun.
Cool.
So anyway, we should try that out for next time. That's kind of
Let's do it.
sort of follow up, but yes.
It totally is.
I have been playing around with reading more. Mike, have you?
No, I think I read less actually.
What? How did you go backwards?
Well, so it is Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time as we record this.
Yep.
And Timery says that I have worked 42 hours and 43 minutes this week.
All right.
So that's why.
Okay.
It doesn't include the time prepping for Bookworm, which thankfully this book was a little bit easier to do.
Yeah. This is an easy one to crank through.
So the desire is still there. It just has not manifested yet for me.
Okay. So Mike didn't do well on that one.
I did not.
I did, though. I started reading a Gap book for once. This has been years in the making, it feels like. But I started reading one called Read People Like a Book. It's by Patrick King. And I'm almost done with it.
Patrick King.
That Patrick King. And anyway, I'm about done with it. So I'll jump into our next book afterwards. But being by Patrick King, that's why I decided that we wouldn't do this for Bookworm. Because Mike's a fan. Mike's a really big fan of Patrick King, if you didn't know that.
So much.
Super big fan.
I am about halfway done with my Gap book, which was the Digital Zettelkasten. And this book you would actually like, at least up until this point. It is not what you think it is. It is a very thoughtful approach. There's a whole chapter on analog versus digital, and it says digital is good for this, analog is good for this. And usually when I see those lists, I'm like, well, maybe. No, you're wrong.
Sure, yeah.
You can tell the author, David Kadavi, I think that's how you say it, knows his stuff. So that would be an interesting one to cover, but it's not one of the big name typical productivity type books,
Sure.
I guess.
You have one down here, Get Busy Living. I don't know how to hold you to this one, but how'd you do on it?
Here ain't I?
Hi,
No.
Mike's living.
uh, Good question. The thought behind this was essentially don't wait to do the things that I really want to do. And I would argue I have done a decent job of this. Uh, the last several weeks have been crazy for me, partly of my own making because I've gone through the part-time YouTuber Academy. And then also I'm in the middle of Ship 30 for 30. And this is day 13, I think. I've shipped 13 days in a row. So I've written and published basically 13 days in a row. Oh, by the way, related to part-time YouTuber Academy, long-term follow-up, the episode before this last one, I said I was going to try to make a YouTube video before the last episode published. And I made it by the skin of my teeth.
I wouldn't say it was by the skin of your teeth. You released this a few days ago. Are you talking
It
about
was
release date? Is that what you're talking about? Got it.
yeah. So I think I published it the morning. No, it must have been the day before. But I only recorded it, I think, 2 days before that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's tough. Knowing how long that
Yep.
stuff takes to edit. Ouch. Well
I'll
done,
put a
sir.
link here in the chat and then also in the show notes. This is inspired by Ship 30. With Ship 30, you basically pick something to write about every day. And so I was thinking, what am I write about today? And one of the things I want to get better at is pointing to Bookworm from all the other things that I do, because we read all these books and get all these ideas from these books. It's easy to expound on those and point to the Bookworm episodes where appropriate. So I made this thread, 5 books every creative should read. And I linked to the Bookworm episodes in the tweet thread, and then also in the YouTube video description, like 4 out of the 5 we had covered. But I took that thread when I saw it. I'm like, this would make a cool video. So I turned it into a video and published my first real YouTube video, in air quotes there, because I've been doing sermon sketch notes for a while. But this is my first YouTuber, part-time YouTuber Academy, endorsed. Like after I've gone through all that stuff and figured out this is kind of the direction and the things that you should consider, took all that into consideration, made my first video with the title slide, thumbnail, all that kind of stuff. And it's performing pretty well. I never really had anything. There was no momentum there, so
Right.
it just kind of appeared out of nothing.
Yeah. It's not like you had a whole bunch of
But
people
I
waiting
had
for the next video.
yeah, I did have one video that I recorded a long time ago, like how I did my sermon sketch note stuff inside of Obsidian. And that one has been generating a ton of views for me over time. It has almost 8,000 views, I think, last time I looked. So actually, I'm at 300 subscribers or something on YouTube. I'm over the 4,000 hour mark for monetization. So now I just need to get to the, for
1,000
view time, I just need
mark.
to get to the 1,000 subscribers. So
Yeah.
smash that bell, like and
Yeah.
subscribe, all the YouTube things.
We got into this. I was streaming yesterday, and I was like trying. I was like, okay, as the YouTube thing, because I stream on YouTube. It's like, what are you supposed to like? There's a bell thing. What's the bell do? Like, I could not for the life of me remember. Like, oh, that's right. It sends the notifications. Like, please don't hit that button. Like, yes, subscribe, but please don't hit that notify button. I love you. I appreciate you, but please don't do that. It's not worth
Fair
it.
enough. Yeah, I honestly had no idea. I just know that's what everybody says. Back to the original thing, though, about the Get Busy Living. So I've been going through all these courses, and I actually have another one that starts next week called Pencil Pirates.
Yeah.
And this one, have you heard about this?
You mentioned it last time. I wrote it down. I didn't get a chance to look into it. But what is
Pencil
it?
Pirates is basically a online cohort-based course that walks you through visualizing ideas. So I kind of do this already in a very narrow way with the sermon sketch note stuff. And so this, I think, is the final piece to the puzzle for my big vision on what YouTube could be for me. It's the talking to a camera, talking about things that I talk about other ways, but in a video format, and then incorporating visuals and animations, which is really just timing the the live drawing on the iPad captured via ScreenFlow or whatever for some of this sketchnote type visualization stuff. I've done this occasionally when I get these pictures in my head, just to communicate an idea, but this is, I think, going to help me do that more systematically and combine that with the systematic writing every day, and then the turning those writing ideas into other pieces of content, other places. There's that word you hate, content, but don't have a better one.
Yeah, if I could
Um,
find a better one, I would use it, but I haven't found it.
Sure. So yeah, that's the next one. So I'm not gonna have a whole lot of spare time here at any point in the near future, but learning a ton. And feel like I'm kind of hitting my creative stride. Like I said, 13 days in a row or something like that, publishing for Ship 30 for 30, and feels really good. I'm like seeing ideas for, oh, I could write about this in this way all over the place
Yep.
now.
Yep.
My drafts is full. Idea generation is no longer a problem.
No, if you know like how to, and we'll get into this a little bit today, but if you know how to qualify something as a potential idea that you could share, like they're everywhere. And if you consume any form of content at all in audio, video, written form, like if you do that for like 30 minutes a day, which most people do significantly more than that, like you're gonna have a ton. You just are.
Yep.
Super fun.
I will mention this now because regarding the Pencil Pirates course, last thing with this, if people are checking that out and are interested in it, there's a code, I think it's Ship Love, all one word, that will get you 10% off. And by the time this publishes, that class will be live. So for people who are watching live or going to watch this replay on YouTube in the next couple of days, and you're interested in that course and you want to save a little bit of money, use that code.
Ship Love. That's not a Bookworm affiliated thing, I assume.
That is not, so that is just like the general code, and then from there it'll ask you, how did you hear about it? And if you put somebody's name who's in the cohort, I guess it ties to an affiliate account, but I've never set one up. So whatever, you can put my name in there if you want, but the code alone will save you 10%.
There you go.
Even if you hate affiliate stuff, feel free to use that code and just leave the referrer blank.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I have two other follow-up items on the list here for myself. The three total that I had, one was read more. Another one was writing out a plan for my online business, which I did exactly nothing for because life. Though I have to say, like, it's getting a lot better. Like, I've been spending a little more time reading, which has been helpful, but I haven't had, like, air to breathe in evenings and such lately because I've got a different website thing I'm building for a client. So anyway, been super busy. That wraps up here this weekend, so I should get to where I can spend some time on that instead of writing code. So getting there, Mike. Getting there. I will get that done. And then my last one was to write out the plan for my day. Mike wanted me to time block. That's what that is. And Mike dictated the terms of this contract. And
hey, in my defense, only when asked.
It's true. That is true. I should not have asked because it got to be significantly more complicated after I asked. So I brought out my notebook and was like, each day was trying to write down my hour by hour, 30-minute by 30-minute blocks, what's going to happen, where and when. I would say I got it done about half of the time, Mike. And the results of this are mixed because there were a couple days where it was really, really close to what I was able to achieve. The other times it was more of a, hey, this is cool. By 9:30, the whole thing's out the window. And I rewrote it one of those days. an hour later, what I had rewritten was out the window. It's like I'm not gonna keep rewriting this. Like this is
No,
not
don't
worth it.
rewrite it.
It's like okay,
Just set it and forget it. I honestly, I don't understand people who feel the need to modify those plans or even manually write out what they did
right,
so you can compare the plan versus the actual. Let the computer be the computer. It can track your time and you can
sure,
look at those numbers if you really want to,
yep,
but there ain't nobody got time to go back and write. This is what I actually did right now.
yep, yep. As Blake says in the chat, like Cal Newport talks about, like that's the thing. The rewriting is the main thing, but I
I get it. I disagree though. I disagree.
I think I would spend probably 45 minutes of my day rewriting that schedule. The days that I had that issue, it was probably at least 45 minutes worth of rewriting that I would have done if I had done that every
Hmm.
time it was going to be off. And so anyway, it's about a fourth of my days I was able to time block and it worked. Another fourth I time blocked and it fell apart, and the other half I didn't do it at all. And the only the only thing I can give you as far as like here's how I feel about it was that the days that I did it and it worked, I felt a lot more accomplished because it was as if like, hey, I did what I set out to do. Like there was that sense of accomplishment. The days where I did it and it completely fell apart were even worse than had I not done it at all, because I felt like I was way off
Mm,
base and there was nothing I could do about it and I had no control over what I was getting into. I don't know if that's just my mindset being the issue. You're looking at me like I'm bonkers with this.
I feel like there's an hour-long conversation to be had on that statement you just made,
All right.
but
this is
let's
this is
leave
why
that for
I've
now.
restrained from doing this time blocking thing many times. uh anyway, I feel like that's probably a follow-up thing. Yeah, as Silent says, an after hours podcast. So anyway, my experience, and I'm sure there's a mind game going on here. It felt like it was significantly worse on those days where I didn't manage to follow through on it. No, even though it was not my, like, it wasn't anything I did. It was simply things out of my control. And I can't quite figure out if, and maybe this after hours thing needs to happen at some point so that you can explain this hour-long thing that I don't understand right now. But if I were to continue doing it, I'm a bit torn because some days it would be super helpful and super good, and other days I feel like it would make it worse. And then sitting somewhere in the middle when I don't time block is kind of what I do by default. So right now, as we speak on this Thursday afternoon, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow because today was my last day of
All right.
doing this experiment given our
I'm
2
gonna
week
give
thing.
you I'm gonna give you another action item.
Curses. What?
Okay, your action item is to the next time you go for a walk, ask yourself why you feel stressed out about creating the plan when you can't stick to it. Just
Okay.
think about like when it doesn't work, why didn't it work?
Okay.
That's all you gotta do.
But I know why it didn't work.
Well, you know the symptom of why it didn't work. But I think if you wrestle through and identify the root causes, and then you give yourself permission to not care about those anymore, you will get to the place where you'll feel the benefit of doing it when it works without all the stress of when it doesn't. I don't think those two are intrinsically tied together. I think they are at the moment for you, but they don't have to be.
What if it's always outside forces that I can't
It will
control?
be outside forces.
It always is. Like the days that it fell apart, it was always an outside force.
Okay, we can do this live. That's cool. So, why do you get upset when you can't stick to your plan? Because of outside forces.
Yep.
Why do you get upset about the outside forces? You can't control it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if you just disconnected the part that you can't control from what you feel about the time block plan. How does that map to the things that are on there and the sense of satisfaction you get when you do a good job? Is it that you followed through on the tasks that you identified you were going to slot in there? Then since it gets thrown off all the time, maybe we just reduce the number of things that you slot into your schedule. You build in more buff, or another thing could be you make your blocks longer. Like there are different tactics you can deploy here to alleviate that feeling. I
Sure.
feel.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it comes down to like these are the things I had it in my head. Like the way my brain works is whenever I put that list together, like I know that that's the plan for today, but because I've got that plan for today, my brain immediately jumps to what that means for tomorrow. And when the whole thing gets derailed today, that means it's not just today that's the problem. It's possibly the rest of the week that I've already got laid out in my head. So it's not just a
Yeah.
derailment of this afternoon. It's the cascading effect that causes, but it's because my brain jumps ahead so fast and I can't really get that part to subside. But I should be used to this. My schedule has to change all the time. But
Yeah, we got to disconnect that, and one way to disconnect that, at least a little bit, would be to build in more margin with your time blocks. But
okay. So do I still have an action item, or did we just do it live?
we kind of did it live, so maybe I'll give you a different action item of continuing it for another couple of weeks,
Man.
so we can talk about it some more.
All right. Okay. Well, that's it I have for follow-up. Let's get off of this topic before I get more work to do. And let's step into today's book, because this is one that I think, Mike, you have brought up at least 4 million times on the course of this 144 episodes of Bookworm. And
That's probably accurate.
and this is the 10th anniversary of this book, Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And it's New York Times bestseller. The one I have is the gift edition. Did you rebuy this to get the gift edition? Just out of curiosity.
Yep,
Okay.
the hardcover one.
Yeah, he's got an afterword that he put together on this, having been through the 10 years. And the subtitle on this is 10 Things Nobody Told You About Being Creative. And I have to say that, like, as a first, like, overarching view of this book, it kind of struck me how much of this had little to do with being an artist. Did you catch this? I'm sure you did. But there's so much of this that I was surprised by how far outside the realm of creativity and artist life this covered, and got into just like life in general. So maybe that didn't surprise you at all, but it struck me.
I can see that, I guess. I do think that this book is really for creative people.
Absolutely is, yes.
But Steal Like a Creative doesn't have the same ring to it.
No, it does not. It does not. But it works because people refer to an artistic view, or an art, like, I'm working on my art, and they could be talking about woodworking. They could be talking about, like, there's all sorts of stuff. People use that term for a lot of arenas. So it does work. I'm not upset by that part at all.
I have a admission here right at the beginning, because you mentioned I've quoted this book like 4 million times, and that's probably true. I think I've misquoted this book 4 million times.
Sure. Okay.
Because I have said before that Steal Like an Artist was the book that explained that when you create something, all you're doing is you're connecting dots in new ways. That's actually not in this book.
No, not at all.
That's a Steve Jobs quote that I must have came across at the same time as this book.
So there's a Steve Jobs quote in here that talks about you have to look backwards to connect dots. You can't look forward to connect dots.
Correct. And there's lots of talk about the dots later on in the book. There's a page that says, share your dots, but don't connect them, which is what stood out to me. So like, wait a second.
Yeah.
But there's another idea here in chapter 1, which is basically saying that same thing. But essentially, I have synthesized the ideas from this book syntopically with quotes from Steve Jobs that I collected from other sources, and given Austin Kleon credit for these many years.
Welcome to the messy world of being an artist. That's kind
So
of
sorry about
hilarious.
that.
It's kind of hilarious.
Yep.
Yep, you definitely stole it. Let's just jump into it because I feel like we're going to cover a lot of things and this could go long if we're not careful. But chapter 1 is just that, steal like an artist, out of the 10 chapters. And this is where he's really just laying out the groundwork of what does it mean to be an artist, I guess would be the way I'd explain that. In that you are, to use the terms, you're stealing ideas and concepts from your mentors, the giants that you look up to, synthesizing those into your own and creating something new based on the things you stole from other artists. That's really the summarization, I feel like, almost of the entire book, but it obviously goes into more than that. But that's, I think, what he's getting at.
That is absolutely what he's getting at, and that's why I misattributed that quote to this book because it fits perfectly. He should have included that Steve Jobs quote.
That's funny.
Maybe he did, and I just missed it. But looking back through it, when I came across that page later on that said, "Collect your dots or share your dots, but don't connect them," that triggered that in my brain. I was like, "Wait a second, that's anti this thing I've had in my head for years."
Right.
And then I started flipping back through, and I couldn't find it. So,
Good job,
but yeah,
Mike.
this chapter is the book in a nutshell, and I still do think that this book was very influential for me in this chapter specifically for giving me permission to create because for a long time I didn't think I was creative. Kind of at the time I read this book, I was at a point where my creativity was expressed through songwriting for I play guitar and I sing on the worship team at my church, and I would write a song and I loved writing songs, but then every time I would write it, I would be listening to the radio or something and I would hear this melody line or this guitar riff that I didn't realize I had stole, and I was like, ah, dang it, I ripped this off from this other place, and I guess I'm just not creative. That's literally the story I told myself. Like, I just don't have what it takes to be creative. All I can do is mash up other things that other people have done. And he quotes Ecclesiastes 1:9 in this book. There's nothing new under the sun. You are a mashup of what you allow into your life. All creative work builds on what came before it. So when you recognize that you're going to be stealing if you are going to be creating, you combine that with what he says on page 14. Your job is to collect good ideas. I kind of reframe that as collect dots, right? The more ideas you collect, the more you can choose from them to be which ones to be influenced by. And I think I would take that even a step further, where if you are just connecting, or if you're collecting dots, your brain is actually connecting those things for you. And sometimes you see how it works, sometimes you don't. That's what's so exciting to me about all of the linked based note taking applications out there is like that's the first time I've been able to visualize that sort of stuff happening outside of my own head, and it does it in a way where it's pretty effortless instead of okay, I can link to this note but then I got to go back to that other note and I got to add a link back to the other one. That's just too much friction for me to do that. So I love this. The whole book is basically just an exhortation to create. And this first chapter is probably the strongest one in the entire book, I would argue. A couple other specific things I want to talk about from here. Page 20, he says, collect books even if you don't plan on reading them right away. Check. And I really like that idea. Actually, just today, because we finished this book, we've got some time before the next one, and I was looking for another Gap book, and I had this idea this book that I wanted to read. I'm like, I have that book somewhere. So I found it on my bookshelf behind me, and I have something now that I'm going to read. But I bought that book a long time ago without worrying about when I was going to read it, and it's just been sitting there ever since. And because I have it, it triggered that in my head, and I was like, oh, I should go read that book. It's Purple Cow by Seth Godin, by the way, if you're curious.
It's a good one.
Yeah. And then the other thing I want to talk about here is these swipe files.
Mm.
Do you know where I'm going with these?
I am not sure where you're going with it, but I know what you're talking about.
All right. So How would you define a swipe file?
Things you've swiped off other people.
But what do you, the way he defined it though is like you put them somewhere and you're not really sure what to do with these yet, right?
Correct.
Sounds an awful lot like a map of content to me.
Just a map.
Sure.
It's classic, right? I obviously when I hear of something like a swipe file and I hear you talking about it, I know it's going to go in Obsidian for you, and everybody under the sun knows that. But the thing that I find interesting is that this is actually, and I kind of got into this a little bit. This is so I started doing a new segment of sorts on the streams that I do personally, where we're essentially just making notes in this case Obsidian, making these notes and creating the links and just talking about random topics and making those connections. But it's ultimately the concept of a swipe file is just like collecting things that you don't know what you're going to do with, and then they get connected elsewhere later. And something like one of these link based note makers is something that's super easy to do and it happens all the time. So I would imagine your take on this is that, hey, I do this all the time already. Ding, done.
Well, this is literally the definition of a map of content that I picked up from Nick Milo, because he defines a map of content as like your workbench when you're wrestling through what do I really think about this thing. So the swipe file would be basically you create a topic, map of content, or map in your case, right? Because we don't want to use that map of content
I like
term.
Blake's moratorium on context. Blake's always trying to find a different word for, or a different way to spell out MOC for me. We haven't found a really good one yet, but that's a good one.
That is a good one. So you have this file named after this topic that you're trying to figure out what you think about this. That's where you would dump all of these things that Austin Kleon would say go into your swipe file.
Right.
So I myself would have a bunch of MOCs, mashups of cutouts. Nice one, Silent Wolf. Right, on these different topics, and I would just put the things that I would, instead of putting it in one giant swipe file, I would just put them in those mementos of contemplation. Thanks, Blake. Let's see how long we can keep this up.
This is good. This is good. I like this. Oh, yes, I get it. I think I get it anyway. Really, the thing that and I've not been somebody who gets into the whole map of content concept, I guess. I make these like home notes, if you will, for different topics, which I know that people who are deep into this MOC world tend to say are not the same thing, but my simpleton brain that summarizes things down can't quite tell the difference, and I get that it's semantics, at which point it's too subtle and I think it's nonsense at that point. But that's me, and I know that people hate on me for that. That's fine, bring it. And I know that like I like to make these jumping off points that get me to other places, and you can do that from a lot of different methods. Anyway, we're getting into the weeds on like notes and such, but the swipe file is really just that. Like it's a way to capture things. If you want to use GTD terms, it's a way of capturing things onto a someday maybe file, if you will, that you can then expand and connect to other things. That's really what he's advocating for here. Is that fair?
Yeah, I call it. It is. I call it out just because I feel like this is actually really great advice. And 10 years ago when he wrote it, probably had no idea what the digital tools that we were going to have at our disposal would allow us to do with this sort of thing. I'm kind of curious what Austin Kleon would use. Another person I'm curious about how they would do this sort of thing is Derek Sivers, because he wrote recently about the power of plain text files.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that he talked about, I totally agree with.
Yep.
It's not, the way it's framed is not, well, let's use this old stuff because that way we'll always have something that can open it. But really, it's just the lowest common denominator so that it's completely future proof. people like when people recommend text files, I think the initial reaction is, "Oh, quit living in the past," but then you realize, "Oh, actually, they're thinking about the future."
Right, right. It's
And so I was surprised how well that comment about the swipe file actually aged over the last 10 years.
correct. Yeah, I've had conversations in the last week about, where do you store information when you need to hold on to it for later? And the people I was talking to were like, I don't know, I just throw things in Word documents, and like my head like cringed. It's like, oh, that hurts so much. And I said something about I don't ever use like PKM or Obsidian or any of those terms. I just say I keep it in text files. And
Yeah,
people look at you like, what? Oh, you're just a
that's what
techie.
the
You're one of
that's
those
what the
tech nerds.
digital that's what the digital Zettelkasten book is advocating for. I forget exactly how he said it, but basically, don't trust an app,
Yep.
trust a technology like plain text files,
Right.
and then you can use whatever app you want that interfaces with that technology.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Thus, like so much of the stuff I work towards is like the non-proprietary world. But yes, weeds. You guys got some good ones here. Mindlessly organized consolidations, milieu of concepts. I like it. This is good. This is good. All right,
We
chapter
better move
two.
on. This is going to be a long one.
It could be. We're on to chapter 2, and we've been at this for 36 minutes. Uh, don't wait until you know who you are to get started. And I, I think it would be very easy to say that Kleon would probably jump into the boat of don't hold on to your art for too long. Boat, because that's kind of what he's getting at here is like, don't be afraid to push things out there. He doesn't say that, but he's ultimately saying that when you're in the creative mode, like a lot of times people say like, I haven't found myself, like I'm still learning about myself in a certain way, or I don't feel like I understand this, like imposter syndrome. Like it's rampant, right? Everybody's faking it to some degree. And that is ultimately what he's telling you. Don't let that get into your head.
Hmm.
Don't let that be your hang up for publishing things and getting things out the door. You don't have to wait until you have all the answers before you publish things. Like how many times, Mike, have you and I released something and it's like, I don't know how this is going to work, but this is what I know right now, and I'm going to publish that. Like this is something at
Yep.
least I do fairly regularly. Like this is where I'm at in my journey. It will hopefully help somebody who's not quite that far on that journey. Maybe there's somebody further. That's fine. I can learn from them. But there are people who are not as far as I am. Always are, or always will be. And it's just life. So don't wait until you have all the answers to get started on this. Like that's, and I think this is what you were saying earlier. Like this is kind of a raw book. Like let's get going. Like this
Yeah.
is get you fired up. This is absolutely one of those parts.
Yeah. I mean, there's honestly not a whole lot extra to add to this. I do like the quote from Salvador Dali. It says, "Those who do not want to imitate anything produce nothing." That's where I found myself for quite a while. So I'll just agree with Mr. Cleon here and say, just start making stuff. Don't worry about imitating other people because you're going to. That imposter syndrome, he defined it here, which I thought was kind of interesting. Psychological phenomenon in which people are unable to internalize their accomplishments. So when you think about that in terms of I don't want to imitate or I'm a fraud and who am I to say this, I feel like the Ship 30 for 30 course that I'm going through right now does a good job of speaking directly to this. And the advice that they say, the way they say it is interesting. They say, don't write for anybody else, write for you 2 years ago. And the 2 years thing is the thing that kind of catches me off guard because that's not that long ago. Your life is
Yeah.
probably not completely different than it was two
Right.
years ago, but it doesn't have to be. You're just trying to communicate what you've learned in a period of time, and you're trying to help out that person who you used to be, who you can still relate to. And when you do that, you don't have to compare yourself to anybody else, and you don't have to judge what you're saying. It's just, this is, don't paint yourself as an expert if you're not, but just say, like, this is my experience. This is what I learned from it. And then nobody can argue with it.
Right.
People can attach to it if it's helpful, or they can leave it if it's not. But It's not a judgment against you as a person, and you don't have to try to pretend.
Yes. Well said. Let's go on. Let's keep going. Chapter 3. Write the book you want to read. This is like, okay, so this concept is one that's come up in developer circles quite a bit, like startups and such. The startups and such that are successful are generally the ones where the founder and the people who created the thing are solving a problem that they themselves struggle with. This is that concept. And this is where, if you're going to write a book, if you're going to make art, you want to make the art or make the book that you want to read. If you wouldn't read the book that you're writing, why are you writing it? One, which is probably an indicator of like a money grab, possibly. Not for certain, but I'm guessing finances are involved if you're doing it and you don't want to, or it's not something you would be excited about. So that little element is out there. Yes, dog fooding. And this is something that I know, like, I have no plans to write a book, but were I to do that, I would probably struggle with it because I'm not sure what that book would be as far as like what I want to write or want to read. Therefore, I want to write it because it seems like every time I want to read a book about something, I can generally find it, if not 400 of them, and have to pick one. So I think from a book stance, it's not something that I find myself wanting to do. I definitely do this when it comes to like coding and such, and like writing little scripts and little packages and gems and stuff that I can use for other projects, like that sort of thing I do. But I can't say that I would do it as far as like a book goes, but that's also not his focus here. I'm extrapolating it into that.
Well, I am going to write a book.
Fun.
I did. I'm going to write another one. I'm going to update it. And I got a kick in the pants to do this even before we read this, because I recently went to the library with my son and showed him all of the sections that I would typically hit up before I just started buying everything that sounded interesting to me off of Amazon. That's a place to start. You know, if you can't afford to buy all the books, just go to the library. They're there. They're free.
Right. Right.
Costs nothing to get a library card. But anyways, there was a book there, and it was called Redeeming the Time. I forget who it was by. And it's basically a Bible-based approach to productivity. And my son got it. And looking through like the people who were raving about it, there's we covered that one by Matt Pearson. Is that the guy? So there's like a blurb from him. There's a blurb from Cal Newport, like all these big names, right? And then in the introduction, he's going through and he's explaining like the typical way people view productivity, and then he tries to introduce this new term, which I thought was kind of clumsy: grace-based productivity. And I was like, faith-based productivity. It's way cleaner.
You had your chance.
Yeah, and I know exactly what verses they're basing everything off of. Like, I've gone through that, and I have succumbed to imposter syndrome for long enough in terms of updating that book and expanding it, really. Like the book that I initially wrote, that was the thing that got me writing every day, and that's what got me doing all of the things that I'm doing online now. And I've kind of just left it at that, as like, well, there, it was a gateway into a whole new world of content creation for me. But also, it's time to go back to my roots, do the thing that I started doing. Ship 30 for 30 has helped me create that consistent writing habit. So once I'm done with that, once I dial in a lot of this other stuff, I'm already starting to write things in terms of that are going to appear in that book. That's another thing I learned from Ship 30 is you can take a single idea and write about it the rest of your life, because you can talk about it from every different angle, and it could go all the way from this tiny little tweet all the way to a 60,000 word book.
Yep.
And it's people build whole careers off of that. Just think about Habits with James Clear.
Yep.
Right. So that was inspiring to me, and I've got something there. I've got something to share. It's something that I've been passionate about for a very long time, and it's time for me to write the book that I want to read.
There you go. I'll buy it.
Cool.
Let's go on, because if you're going to write a book, chapter 4, you need to use your hands, Mike. So
Yeah, sure.
so that's yeah, it's very short the way I said that, but this chapter, use your hands, he's talking about basically the value of the analog world, to use the terms I like to use, and the value of doing things physically. And even to the point where he talks about how he has two different desks. One's his digital desk and one is his analog desk, and the digital stuff's not allowed to touch his analog desk. It's okay to go the other way, just not digital to analog. And I totally get what he's getting at here. Like, if you want to like prompt your creative brain doing things physically, like with a whiteboard, with a notebook, with a walk in the woods, with a paintbrush, whatever that is, like doing it physically does make a big difference, I find, anyway. But you've heard me preach this for years now. So I'm going to quit talking about it because you guys know exactly where I'm going.
You are Analog Joe, after all.
Exactly.
No, a couple of cool ideas. That's the gist of the chapter, absolutely. But a couple of cool ways that he says it. Work that only comes from your head isn't any good. I like that. I think that's true. My best ideas come when I am intentionally going for a walk and I'm just going to wrestle with this problem, or I'm going to go for a run, or whatever. But getting out, moving my body definitely helps with this. By the way, a plug here for the Bookworm episode on the extended mind by Annie Murphy Paul, because I feel like there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there. It's not just your hands. Use your body, basically.
Yep.
And that book talks about a lot of the ways that you can do that. I love the analog versus digital. I want to have an analog and digital desk. My way my office is set up right now, especially with all the things I've done to make it so I can record YouTube without having to set anything up. It's not possible at the moment, but I definitely want to do that. And find a way to bring your body into your work. This doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to go outside for a walk if it's raining just so you can use your body. It could be as simple as a standing desk, or if you're talking, I do this all the time. We're on videos, we record these, but a lot of times when I'm just doing audio, even, I am like talking with my hands and I am very expressive because that injects life into the
Yep.
thing that I'm making, I've found. And the computer is good for editing ideas, but not generating them. Totally agree. I have been thinking about this a lot. Steve Jobs, the quote, the computer is a bicycle for the mind. But I think a lot of people view technology as, this is going to help me be more productive because it's going to allow me to be more efficient. That's not really what we need to manage at this point. What we need to manage is our minds. And if you're not careful, then the computer can actually hinder that. So I don't know. There's a whole nother tangent to that we should explore at some point, but probably not right now.
No, it totally makes sense, because I know that like, whenever I'm creating ideas, like writing down concepts, like if I'm doing that on pen and paper, it allows me to get to more of them. Like I generate more ideas doing that. Whereas if I'm trying to do that like in a list on a computer, there's something about like it's harder for whatever reason to move from one bullet down to the next, or to generate a new bubble on a mind map. Like it takes more to do that than it does to just slide your hand. I don't know why that is, but simple stuff like that seems to make it so much easier to just get things out of my brain. So I'm with you. Coming up with the ideas is way better on paper. Come at me. Chapter 5, side projects and hobbies are important. And this one, I know people have had a little bit of blowback on from other people. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. I can see his face. I can see his avatar, but I can't think of his name right now. Who people talk about how do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life, or try to do the side thing until it becomes your full-time gig. And he's kind of making the argument that it's almost better to keep them as side gigs. I don't think he would say that 100% of the time, but regardless, it's the side projects and hobbies that help you like stay energized and help you come up with even more ideas and have some of that creativity, because it allows you to have a bunch of different arenas that you're thinking in.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you can cross the dots over from thing to thing. Whenever I think about like my day job, like we were talking about beforehand, like all the video stuff that I do, and because of all the video stuff, it means like there's tons and tons of video gear that I deal with all the time. There's tons of networking and internet stuff I do, tons of audio gear, like high-end audio stuff and video stuff. And yet I go home and swing an axe and split wood. And I think tomorrow I'm building garden beds. And what am I? I'm like plowing some dirt up, moving dirt with a skid steer. Like I've got some like very labor intensive things I'm doing tomorrow. It amazes me how many times the two can cross, like to get ideas for one or the other when I'm in either arena. So it is fascinating to me how those two can help out. But again, like the side projects and hobbies thing, like it's great to have those other arenas that you can bounce between in order to get some of the creativity going. So it's absolutely worthwhile.
I completely agree. It's the side projects that take off, is what he says. But I think the real value of the side projects is kind of what you were saying, that it allows you to develop things in a different arena. I was stressed out about that for a long time because I couldn't find a common through line between some of the stuff that I was doing for a while. That's why I hesitated to do the sermon sketch note stuff. It's like this doesn't fit with a bunch of other things that I've done real cleanly.
Yeah.
So I don't want to throw it out there. And there's a phrase he says in this chapter which I liked. What unifies your work is the fact that you made it. You don't need anything else. And so I like that. It's empowering and encouraging. Basically, like whatever appeals to you as a side project, do it. It doesn't have to make any sense. It doesn't have to plug real cleanly into something else that you're doing. And I found that, like with the YouTube stuff, I dragged my feet on YouTube for a really long time, and I've only published one real video, so I can't say that I've like figured this out.
Yeah.
But just the fact that I have done that one, and I'm starting to get that flywheel going and seeing how the ideas I generate for writing can translate to other things. There's connections there that I didn't realize until I started to do the thing. And I don't know why it was so hard for me to connect. We have this podcast where we read all these books, and these books talk about all these other things that I talk about and write about, all these other places online. So I could just point to the stuff that I already do about the books.
Yep.
Like I never saw that until I engaged with this thing, which I wasn't sure was gonna fit. And then once I did it, that's like the path forward became clear. So I just want to call this out because I'll add my admonition here to Austin's, that just do the thing if you think it's interesting and figure out how it fits later. And if you don't ever figure that out, but you like to do it anyways, don't even worry about it. Just continue to do the thing.
Yeah, because you don't know where it's gonna go, and it seems like it usually
Yep.
ends up someplace you didn't plan on anyway. Like this
And don't
goes.
put pressure on it to be something. Like that's the other thing he says. It's
Yeah.
important to have a hobby, something that gives but doesn't take. The minute that you try to make something a job or a revenue stream, then it's taking from you because you got to continue to pump stuff out there. And that was my mistake the first time that I tried to go off on my own and do faith-based productivity. I wanted to launch this business, and this was going to be the thing that paid the bills, and it was never ever going to do that. It's a part of maybe something like that, but even if it's not, that's fine. There's something later on in this book that I really want to talk about regarding day jobs and side hustles, but it doesn't need to turn into that. It's not. Oh, the fact that it only grows so far is not a judgment of whether this thing is of the thing's value.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to chapter 2, like don't wait until you know who you are to get started. It does kind of go back to that because you're you're essentially not worrying about the quality of it. But like if you try to figure out all the details of how you want things to go with your creative life before you start, then you're putting yourself in a box that's very likely too small, and you're probably not going to start because you don't feel like you know the end of the story. Hey, guess what? Nobody does. You don't know where that's going to go until you start. So you have to get started at some point. Whenever I started streaming, which has been a while back now, it was something that I was doing just kind of trying to figure out how streaming works. I had been forced into it with COVID and church stuff to learn how it all worked. And once I did that, it's like, well, it's not too hard for me to translate that over into some of the personal stuff I do. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, just me on camera for an hour and a half. But we'll try it and see what happens. And it's morphed into some interesting things. And now we're talking about, should you own social media data or not? Like that's and what does that even mean? Like these are the things we're talking about just yesterday. So it's been kind of fascinating to see like how does that morph over time and what can become of them. And so you don't know. Like that starts off as side hustle stuff, and it's okay for it to stay there. It is a thing that can go places you never expected it to, and that's okay. You have to be okay with that part. That
Agreed.
brings us to chapter 6. Chapter 6? Yes, chapter 6. The secret. You want to know what the secret is, Mike?
What is the secret?
Do good work and share it with people. It's not really a secret.
Sounds so simple.
It is very simple to say. Do good work and share it with people. This is, yeah, what is good. The thing here is that like work on making things quality as per your mind and share it. People, one of the things he calls out in here is like, how do you become found? Like, how do people find you? And he mentions like you should relish the fact that you're not found up front.
Yeah.
And take advantage of the fact that nobody knows who you are, because it gives you a chance to publish things without dealing with all of the ramifications of emails and support and did I get this paid or did I get that, or and who's doing what and admins and such. Like you don't have any of that. You can just focus on the art side of it. That's a big value and you don't even realize it's there. I wish I had thought about that more.
Exactly. Makes your approach to the things that you are currently doing, speaking for you, I guess, but for myself too, a little bit different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just enjoy the fact that we are the size we are and talk about what we want to talk about.
Correct.
There's a lot of benefits that come with that you don't realize when you're just chasing a goal. Enjoy the journey. One of the things I liked about this chapter is the encouragement to give your secrets away. I don't know what you think your secrets are, but I don't think it needs to be something completely profound. One of the things that I thought of, because every time I share it with people, they are kind of blown away by it when they try it, is the 3 questions from my personal retreat course. What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I keep doing? For a long time, I felt like, well, I can talk about the personal retreat stuff and the value of that whole process, but I can't give away those questions.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes it all work.
Right.
And whatever, take the questions.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
One of the things that he defined as a secret was Bob Ross. And when he used that example, I knew immediately what he was talking about, because there is a sushi place near us that my wife and I love. It's so good. And we go there almost every week for our date night. They just do all this like crazy kind of sushi. They've got fried rolls, they've got baked rolls, really, really good. And it's like this old martini bar that you go in, and they have these TVs up on the wall. And every time we go in there, they are playing Bob Ross videos. And so I see the happy little trees almost every week. And it occurred to me watching these, because I don't know when these were filmed. These are old.
It's a while back, yeah.
I'm like, Bob Ross is the OG YouTuber. He's just up there doing his thing, showing people how to do this. He doesn't care. Like, just go ahead, copy what I'm doing. And that's what made him successful. And so when Austin's talking about that and he's saying, be like Bob Ross, basically, I was already thinking that way. And I was like, yeah, just share it. And YouTube is interesting because the way that you make money on YouTube is not, well, I guess you could like sell your own stuff if you grow your audience big enough, but the way that a lot of people get paid on YouTube is they just do exactly what Bob Ross was doing, and they do it long enough and consistent enough, and they monetize because they've attracted enough attention. And the way you're going to attract enough attention is just keep giving stuff away. So that's very different than my paradigm on content creation, I guess. Is looking for a better term, but I can't think of one. You know, the stuff that we make and like giving away parts of it, but keeping the real good stuff behind a paywall. That's kind of how I used to think about it. And ever since Part-Time YouTuber Academy and reading this book was another push in that direction, is like, just share it.
Yeah. It's scary to do that though, because you
It
feel like
is.
once I've given this out, everybody's going to be just like me. Like, well, it's not true. It's not true at all. Like, I know that, and this is a little bit different realm, but we regularly have other churches come and tour our church from a tech stance. They want to like see what we're doing and how. And I have toured other churches that are bigger than us to just see how they're doing things as well. And every once in a while, you will run across a church that's like, no, we don't do that. And it's always like, huh, interesting. Like, we're churches together, like from a Christian stance, like we're working together towards the same mission, but you don't want to share your quote unquote secrets. And that's ultimately what a lot of folks are scared of. Like, they don't want other people to start producing the exact same thing they are. Like, well, we're not. I don't want to be like you in that sense. I just want to know how you're doing it. And then I want to morph that into what I'm doing. I'm going to steal some of what you're doing into what I'm doing, but I'm not copying that exactly. I don't want to. So it is interesting whenever you come across that when people have that sense, like those churches, I don't want anything to do with anymore. Like, it's just completely weird how that happens. But other churches that, like in other groups that I can have that connection point with, I kind of want to know more about them, and you have a closer relationship with them. So it is just kind of fascinating.
Indeed.
All right, let's go on to the next one, which is geography is no longer our master. Basically, you can go anywhere you want, which isn't true. I actually had a hard time fitting this one in. Like, all of the chapters here, I felt like made a lot of sense. This one, maybe I need you to explain this one for me, because geography is no longer our master. He goes on about how you can pick where you are because of the way life works today, which isn't wrong. So you need to pick a place that you want to be and build from there. But there's so much of like my history that's around like where you are is a part of who you are. And I guess I have a hard time disconnecting that. Maybe that's the farm boy in me coming out. I'm not sure what that is.
Sure.
So maybe I need you to take this one.
Well, that's certainly part of it, but I don't think that's the whole thing. One of the things he says in this chapter is that there's always a community that you can connect with online. And that is more true now than it has ever been. Remember, this is the 10th anniversary edition. So
Right.
this was written 10 years ago. But it was probably about 10 years ago, maybe not quite that long, when I was doing that exact thing, but I did not realize it because I was downloading podcasts for productivity nerds and people who were a part of the Apple community, even though I had never met or been with any of these people. I was actually the big thing in the Apple world was the Mac World conference, and it was in California. I'm in Wisconsin. So I had finally convinced somebody who lived in San Diego to go with me so I wouldn't have to be there alone. The year that it got put on hiatus, and obviously it never came back. So I never had a chance to go to that, never had a chance to go to WWDC and unconference, any of that stuff. But that same year, I also took the first step of going and getting involved with that real community by driving down to Macstock. Now it's obviously a small portion of like Macworld, WWDC, all those kinds of people. But my point is that I was listening to those podcasts, and so I felt like I had a seat at the table. I was allowing those people to speak into my life, even though it wasn't a two-way conversation. It didn't even need to be. I was around my people, and I couldn't find them where I lived. So that was one way that I interacted with them, quote unquote interacted. Then Macstock was another one, and there's different forums and things that different communities that I've engaged with over the years. There's lots of different vectors into these communities. And I think that is the main point here with Geography is No Longer Our Master. I do agree with him on some level. I'm not going to pick up and move either. I've got 5 kids. We're real involved with the church that we're at. Like, but if I wanted to, it would not be impossible. I work for a company that is local, but it's basically remote. Most of the team is remote, and I could go work from anywhere in the world if I wanted to, because that's just like the way that the world is changing. I'm not going to for several other reasons, and it's easier to do when you don't have a whole bunch of roots planted in a specific area. But that was the big thing that would hold people back a lot of times. Is like, well, if I pick up and move, I'm not going to have a job. How am I going to pay my bills? Like, there are a lot of scenarios where that is not necessarily the thing that is going to be holding you back. But then also, you don't have to physically be in those locations either. You can find other ways to connect without the borders.
So maybe I took this wrong, because the way I took it was he was advocating for moving to a place with people,
Well, there definitely was a hint of that.
because that was the part that stood out to me. Like the part of like you can connect to any community you want online today, knowing that this is 10 years old. In today's world, it's even more so true. More so true. More true. And the concern I had was like if he's advocating for moving so that you can be around people or an area that helps you be creative. Like that's not necessarily wrong, but being someone who advocates for putting down deep roots and working through difficulties, whether you want to be through them or not, like I feel like there's value in that. And leaving for the sake of creativity, I feel like sets a standard and makes it a little too open-ended. Like this is where like constraints are when creativity thrives. It's that concept. And if you take away the constraint of geography for the sake of creativity, it feels like a backwards move to me. Maybe I'm
Well,
weird in that.
I would say it's not removing the constraint for creativity, but it is removing the excuse for creativity
Sure.
where you'd say, I can't do this because I'm not by these other people who are doing this thing.
Sure. Yeah, and that I get. Like if you're if you are a filmmaker, you're probably moving to LA. Somewhere in that area is my guess. At some point in life. Like that's just the way it works. So like things like that I get. You know, if you're going to be someone who's photographing icebergs living in the depths of Kansas, probably isn't a good idea. Like there's some pieces of this that I totally get. But for the general average person, like those are exceptions. Those aren't the rule, I wouldn't say. So
Yep.
I think maybe that's where I was getting. Anyway, this could just be me. Like, I just want to stay where I am. Like that's totally what, what it is. So it was a little bit, I don't want to say it's off-putting, and it's not wrong, I don't think. It was just a little bit like,
Mhm.
I guess maybe I'm not following what he was trying to get at, but I don't know.
Let me try to explain this book in a nutshell from my perspective. He's got these 10 different chapters, which are like these big ideas. And then inside there, he's basically sharing every idea he's had that fits under that heading, much like Derek Sivers, in my opinion.
Yep.
And if you've read any of Derek Sivers' books, there tends to be contradictory advice in those books. And you're not intended to follow it all. You're intended to take the ones that resonate with you and do something with them.
Yeah.
And he's kind of explicit in saying, like, these are just all my ideas. Austin Kleon doesn't say that. So maybe that's where you feel like this doesn't reconcile in your brain. But when I read that part about physically moving, that's the way I interpreted it through the Derek Sivers lens.
Sure.
It's like, oh, this is just another way that this geography is no longer our master, could be manifested, and this one doesn't apply to me because I ain't moving.
Right. Right. And that was kind of the reaction I had. I was like, I'm not doing that, and then moved on. But it was, I think that's a good point to bring up because like in my head, this was all supposed to work together. So thanks for calling that out because it's not actually true, and I don't know that he would even say it's true because I don't think he even called that out specifically that this is all. You need to do all of these. Like, no, that's not what he's said anywhere in this at all. So don't take it that way.
I don't know if he would explicitly say it the way that Derek Sivers says it in the introduction to some of his books, but that's my interpretation of how this chapter specifically was put together and how I flowed with what he was sharing.
Sure. Makes sense.
And that's general advice for anybody reading any book. Take
yes.
the stuff you like and discard everything else.
Yep. Yep.
If you find yourself completely agreeing with everything in a book, that's a red flag.
Or it's a really good book.
One of the two, the only ones I can really think of were like, yeah, I absolutely agree with everything this author is saying, is the ones like the Viktor Frankl books that we just finished.
Well,
Because
that's what came to my head. Like, okay,
Yeah.
so you read a Viktor Frankl book and you agreed with everything he said, so something's wrong.
But that's his experience. He's telling you this is what I learned when I was in the concentration camp. How can you possibly,
yes.
in our point in history,
Yes.
go back and say I disagree with that?
Right.
So it's different. I think a lot of the books in the productivity space try to be, either intentionally or not, this is how you should do things. And any book that says this is how you should do things, you should not do everything it says. You should find one or two things that click for you, but you should absolutely not try to do it all.
Yes. And this is a part that I'm not going to do. I am not moving, not going anywhere at all. However, I will go to the next chapter, which is chapter 8, Be Nice, which is just that. Be nice, Mike. Don't be mean. Because in the world of online, if you're mean, people will find out about it, and it doesn't look good for you. And don't try to stab people behind the back because people can figure it out. Because guess what? There's a log of everything anymore. And when you've been mean to somebody, it's out there and you cannot delete it. Good luck. So be nice.
The internet never forgets.
Yes, totally. Never, never, never forgets. So yeah, Mike is always mean.
I can be. Uh, so my 4-year-old, whenever we watch a movie, there's a bad guy, right? And every time she identifies the bad guy acting in a way which is mean, she tries to say he's a jerk, but it usually comes across as he's a joke. So we've just internalized that as a family. And anytime we see somebody being a jerk, we say that he's a joke.
I like it.
And there are so many jokes online. It's easy to spot them.
Totally. Totally.
But yes, just this is not hard. Uh, look to look to give more than you take. Really is what this boils down to. I read a book for our men's ministry that define. I think it's called "Maximize Manhood" by Ed Cole. He talks about love versus lust. Love is the desire to benefit the other at the expense of self. Lust is the desire to benefit self at the expense of others. So, from a religious context where you're supposed to love everybody, that's kind of what that looks like to me. Is don't look at what you can get, look at what you can give. You can apply that through whatever other lens you want. But that's what I view this as. And one of the coolest stories from this book is found in this chapter where he talks about Harold Ramis. I don't know how to say last names. I'm sorry. But he said, find the most talented person in the room, and if it's not you, go stand next to him, hang out with him, try to be helpful. That's great advice. And I feel like that's essentially what my online career has been. Is just trying to be nice, trying to help people. And then when you help someone, they're like, hey, that was pretty cool. You want to do this other thing? And that opens up a lot of other opportunities for you.
Yeah, and he's got a thing in here is like make friends, ignore enemies. Like this is totally in the world of online, like ignore your trolls. They do exist. They're all over. If you're doing anything of any worth or value, they will find you. And as you're getting into YouTube, there are lots and lots of trolls on YouTube.
Oh, I know. I've seen quite a few of them already.
Yep.
So the one video that's kind of taken off has been like the cross-reference library I do for my sermon sketch notes. And I get comments all the time about, oh my goodness, I'm so sick of these Bible thumpers talking about obsidian. Like,
Yep.
sorry, it's how I use it.
Yep. Get over it. It's okay. Yep, they're out there. All right, let's keep moving. Chapter 9. Be boring. Which is just all the little stuff about how to get work done. Like what does he have in here? It's like taking care of yourself, staying out of debt, keep your day job. Mike, don't quit your day job, according to Austin Kleon, which is kind of going back to what we were talking about with like side projects and stuff. Get yourself a calendar, keep a log book, which what he's referring to as far as like the keep the chain. Like if you've got a calendar, like did I do it today or not? It's kind of that concept. What else?
Yeah, he mentions Jerry Seinfeld in this chapter,
Yeah,
but
the other
we
one
don't
he's
need
got
to
there
go
is
into
Mary
all of
Well.
that because, yeah.
So yeah, I mean these are all the like super short productivity advice sort of things. Not all, but to somewhat. And that's what he's getting at. It's like do the boring stuff so that you can get the work done. So you can do the creativity thing. And he's not wrong. Like absolutely not wrong. It's like it's the whole concept of, show up and do the thing every day, build routines, build habits, keep track of it so that you don't break the chain. Like these are all very standard I guess recommendations and not really anything I was surprised by other than the fact that he was calling it boring to do all of those things, which I figured you wouldn't be too thrilled about. I was like, no, that's the exciting part. Like building habits and routines. That's not boring. Like,
Well, it is when you first encounter it.
it totally
If you're
is.
looking at somebody that you admire and you're like, I want to do what they do, and you see what they produce, their art,
Yep.
and then you get to know them and you see how they actually make it. There's always a little bit of a letdown.
Always,
It's like,
always
I
is.
thought this was going to be a lot more impressive than it really is.
It always seems like it should be like some big fanfare filled, bouncy houses to make my painting, like all this stuff. And it's like, oh no, he gets up at 5 in the morning and does the same thing every single day. That's boring.
That's why people gravitate towards the tools and the apps, I feel,
Oh, sure.
because it's new, it's approachable. I can just throw money at this thing. And then this is going to provide the breath of life into the habit or the routine. No, it's not. You got to deal with the motivation. You just got to show up every day.
Yep.
And you're right. When you do that long enough, you see the results that come from it, and that provides excitement. But when you first encounter that idea of like, so I just got to write for an hour before I go to the office.
Yeah, you do.
Fine.
You do. Yep. If you're going to be a YouTuber, you got to write
Yep.
scripts and record and edit like every day.
Yep.
Welcome.
There is a quote in this though that I wanted to talk about. Page 125 says, "The trick is to find a day job that pays decently, doesn't make you want to vomit, and leaves you with enough energy to make things in your spare time." This is great advice. This is unbelievably good advice. I wish I would have caught this the first time I encountered it. Not that I regret anything about my journey and how it's played out here, but one of the things I have noticed, having reflected on the last several years, and the last couple of years specifically, being a part of the Blanc Media team, I loved my time there. I loved working with all those people. I recognize though that I had pressure to create on a regular basis. It was my job. It was what I was getting paid for. And it feels kind of nice not to have that anymore. It I don't know how to explain this. And I hope this comes across the right way. Um, I really had no intention of leaving Blanc Media. I kind of stumbled into an opportunity that was too good to say no to, and it was an area for me to grow, an opportunity for me to grow in areas that um, I was curious about relating to business and management. But I've found that with creating on the side and not having the pressure of gotta have this workshop this month or get this course done by this time. I'm kind of driven and I want to get stuff out there regular basis anyways, and podcasts sort of do that with every other week, but that's a little bit different. This doesn't feel to me like I'm making something from a quality standard. I mean, yes, there is, because we've done it long enough. I've been able to delegate a bunch of that stuff, but this kind of feels like I'm just showing up and talking to my friend, as opposed to like a YouTube video where I could always tweak that until it's good enough and then I release it, or a blog post where you continue to tweak things until it's good enough and you publish it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because
So
it's more like documenting an existing thing you're going to do anyway, instead of creating something out of nothing.
yeah, this, I mean, podcasts for me have always just been like a moment in time, and this is what I was thinking about at that moment. I guess blog posts and videos are kind of that way too, but not having to do that on a schedule, or being able to just chuck that schedule and say, you know what, I don't feel like it today. Giving myself permission to do that and not having the way that I provide for my family be affected by that. That a lot of stuff that I do on the side, like Focus Podcast, we sell ads and things like that. So if I were to say, I don't want to do this anymore, that I would feel that a little bit, but it's not the primary thing.
Right.
There's no pressure to continue to do that as a job. It's something that I can just do, and I don't have to do the SEO if I don't want to, and I don't have to follow the formulas for the headlines to get the clicks if I don't want to. I can just be me if I want to.
Yep.
And that's good enough. And that feels really, really good.
I find that the people that I follow online that I really, really respect and that I get the most from are people with day jobs and it's not their main thing. Do you feel that way? Maybe that's just me, but I feel like the people that I really love learning from are people who have a day job like I do and can do the
Well,
sort of thing on the side. It's
this
kind
is
of like
why I
they're
wanted
living
to.
it and making stuff about it at the same time.
Yeah, I think maybe. I think that can be the case. I don't think it has to be the case, but I also see a whole bunch of people lately who quit their day job to do their art full time,
Yep,
and the online community tends to celebrate that. One of
correct.
them is my Focus co-host, David Sparks, and I'm
Right?
happy for David that he is able to do that. But what I don't like, or what I think is dangerous, is putting people like that, and John Siracusa did that, and other people have done that, and they tend to get put on a pedestal, and then kind of subconsciously everybody else who's making anything, there's implicit pressure to do that too, and there shouldn't be. I think the ideal way for most people to do this is exactly what Austin Kleon talks about, exactly what Derek Sivers talks about. Just do the day job, and it's actually a benefit that that doesn't have to drive the art. And then on the side, you can go do the art, and it can just be what it is. There's no pressure to make it into something that it's not.
Right. Yes. I'm with you. All right, let's go to our last chapter here, which is creativity is subtraction, which is 100% true. Like whenever if you want to use the video concept, you record a big bank of video, and when you're done, it's usually less than 10% of what you recorded, or even less than that. I just did a big video project for an afternoon session. The video, the part that I'm referring to, was 3.5 minutes long. You want to guess how much raw footage I had for that 3.5 minute video, Mike? So somewhere in the realm of 4.5 hours worth of raw footage that went into that 3.5 minutes. It was nuts. And that's absolutely what he's getting at here. Is like whenever you sit down and write something, you always write it to be significantly longer than what you're going to end up with because you're going to edit it down. And the creative part is knowing what to keep and what to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that's really difficult and unique to you. So as we're talking about steal like an artist, you steal, take ideas, connect dots from a lot of different people to make a thing, and then knowing what parts of that thing to remove is what makes you you. That's kind of the way I took this, which I really like.
That is one approach. That's not the angle I took from this.
Okay, go for it.
I agree with that 100%, by the way. That is absolutely true. Um, when you start with something, you basically, what makes it great is the stuff that you take away. I'm not sure if you talked about that with like the Michelangelo's David and stuff like that, but I've heard that story before where I just chipped away all the excess stuff, and what was already there came out. Was kind of the story that people tell. But I took this in terms of the actual process. So just getting started with creating, because one of the things he says in this chapter is that nothing is more paralyzing than the idea of limitless possibilities. And the way to get over creative block is to place constraints on yourself. This is also 100%
Oh
true.
yeah,
And
definitely.
that's kind of what the Ship 30 for 30 program does, is it gives you constraints. You've got these short little essays, and you're going to do it every day. And just having those constraints has allowed me to write and publish for 13 days in a row, hopefully going on 30. But if you start with, I don't know what to write about, then the tendency is to go rack your brain for the best idea. And I've captured a whole bunch of stuff, so I look through those and I kind of sniff test each one, and I don't want to do that one right now. I don't want to do that one right now. Then I get to the end of the list and I'm like, oh, that's it. I just got a bunch of junk in here. But if you just take the first idea that you jotted down, first one you encounter in the list, like, okay, that's it. I'm doing this one. you can create something kind of cool from that.
You can. Absolutely.
and then and then you just get that out there, and then the next day you pick the next one. And then in the meantime, you're replenishing that because you build up confidence that you can turn any one of these junky ideas into a good one, that into something valuable, that you don't judge stuff in the moment anymore. You're like, oh, that's an idea. That's interesting. I'm just going to capture that. Capture that. And then like you put in the reps, you place constraints, and then you create the momentum. You start where you are with what you have. It's kind of the phrase I jotted down to kind of summarize all this. You just start going, and then that creates the momentum to keep going. So I think that's the thing that most creative people will struggle with at the beginning is, I don't know where to start. I got to have this awesome idea in order to start. No, you need to have an idea in order to start. It's a quantity problem, not a quality problem. And once you have something, you have everything that you need in order to start. Once you start, then you will find the next kind of fear is that, well, I won't find something else to replace that once it's gone. Yes, you will, especially once you teach yourself not to care about the quality. You will find something, and then you will refine it, and that thing will be cool too.
I'm with you 100%. This is one of the things that I really like about this book, in that you can take a lot of different things a lot of different ways inside of this. Like, yes, he has like his intended way, but he wrote this in such a way that you can interpret it a few different directions if you want to, which is what I tend to do that with things regularly. Like, I tend to conceptualize and try to get my head around like what is the raw idea they're trying to convey. I do that a lot, which is where Mike sometimes like looks at me funny, like, how did you get that? That's usually is what's happening. But I love that whenever it's possible to do that. This is absolutely one of those. So yes, you're absolutely right. Putting the constraints on is sometimes the best way to do it. I do this all the time. Like, whenever I'm looking for a specific product, open source project, or something that does a thing I want to do, I will like mentally put in constraints of things that I want it to be able to fit into. You probably do this with Obsidian plugins and such. Like, here's the thing that I want to happen, and here are the constraints that I'm putting in place in order to do what I want to do. How can I make that happen? Like, and there's so many different ways that you can come at things, like just trying to find products and ways of working with tools. It's kind of fun. But anyway,
Yeah,
constraints.
there's a lot of different ways you could embrace this. You could use the technology, say this is good enough, this is my minimum bar, like you were
Right.
talking about. That's why I always tell people, when you're starting with productivity systems and things, start on paper first. You can always scale it up, but
Yep.
with paper you can do anything, and then that'll influence the direction that you go. You could do this with time constraints. One person that comes to mind is, I think his name is Jonathan Mann, the Song a Day guy,
Yeah. Yeah.
the guy who wrote the ATP theme song. Literally committed to writing a song every single day. And just the act of doing that makes it easier to keep going. And then also, if he were here and I could talk to him, I'm sure he would say that he's been able to grow his skill and develop his art to a higher level, higher quality, because he's put in so many reps.
Yes. I think this brings us to the end of the book, Mike, which gets us to, he's got an afterword where he really just kind of reiterates a lot of what we've already covered and talks about how he's moving on, I guess. He's like, yeah, one of the good things you can do is when you create something is don't fixate on it. Be willing to move on to the next thing once you've released
Yep.
something. That's kind of the main thing I took away from that. So he's like, I'm not going to spend too much time here because I'm on to the next thing. Like, okay, I appreciate that, but it's
Which
done
is
well.
what you should do.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
But that part almost seemed like the publisher had this idea for a 10th anniversary edition, and they're like, we're going to create something extra from the author, and we're going to stick it down here at the end. And then he's like, oh, fine. I've moved on,
Absolutely.
like you said.
Yes.
So that's one approach. The other approach, which is probably more likely, would be that he just wanted to drive home a theme in this book, because he mentioned earlier, I believe, I don't think it was at this part in this section, when you post to a blog, the new stuff goes to the top. And so you just need to keep creating there's pressure there to keep creating something new.
Yep.
And that's really what you should be focusing on. So don't dwell on this thing that you did in the past, because you don't want to try to catch lightning in a bottle and make something perfect. You want to consistently make something. And the process of making the thing is going to lead to higher quality over time.
Yes. All right, Mike, that brings us to action items. Unless there's something else you want to cover first.
Well, let's talk about action items.
I have one, unless you give me more, which you're making it a habit
I
of
already
lately.
did give you more.
We did it live, so it's done. I've got it checked off. So unless you're changing it.
Oh.
But I have one, and it's something I've done in the past, but I just haven't done it in recent months, maybe last year. But building out basically it's a daily tracker for creativity, like making sure I'm writing every day in some form, or recording or editing or something along those lines. So I want to build out a calendar for that so that I can keep track of those things and make sure that I've got a way to know if I've got the chain going or if I've got it broken or not. Like that's what I want to work myself towards. That way I can keep track of it and such. And like I've been pretty good about making things, at least internally at work, stuff and a few things online, but I haven't been too good about like some of the writing and video stuff that I've been wanting to do online. So getting there. So yes, that's ultimately what I'm working on. You?
Both of my action items come from chapter 8, so apparently I do need to work on being nice.
All right. Be nice.
One thing that I want to do from this chapter, I talked about writing fan letters. And there are a lot of people that I have really looked up to over the years. And I've talked about how they have reached out to me and written letters. And that has been very helpful to me, which is kind of the other thing, keep a praise file. So like that stuff I want to collect so I can go back and look at it occasionally. There's lots of people who will say mean things, but collect and review the ones that actually are nice. And then also the big one for me is to write that fan letter. So tell somebody else that I really appreciate their work. And the way that he frames this in the book is important too. You're not doing it in a way to create an opportunity for you to get something from them. You're just telling them that you appreciate them and what they're doing. So give more than you take, right? Not looking to get anything from this, but just encourage somebody. Now, if I do that online and I tweet somebody and I say, really appreciate this, I have no idea sometimes if they're going to see that. Doesn't matter. That's the big takeaway here. If it's an actual letter that I write, maybe that's what this looks like. I haven't clearly thought about that yet. I just want to pick somebody who has been influential and I want to say, I appreciate you, basically. And I think this needs to be somebody that I don't have a direct connection with. Kind of another version of this would be reaching out to the people that I have been able to develop a relationship with via text message or something like that and say, hey, I really appreciate you. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about writing something with a good chance that I never hear a response. I never encounter this person again. And that is completely okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, I'll hold you to that, and I'll expect a letter.
All right.
All right, that's what I've got. So I guess that brings us to style and rating, and I'll kick us off here. So steal like an artist. Austin has a really good style. Obviously, like this is easy to read. It's like a 3-day read if you want to take your time. And this is one that you could sit down and read probably in a sitting if you really wanted to. There's lots of artwork in it, and a fair amount of like blank space to process. Part of me wonders why he made that choice, but at the same time, like that's very much in an artist feel, is to have the space to add to it, like add your own thoughts to it, which I don't do. I put those at the back in the doodles section that he left at the back of it, which I appreciated very much, which was very fun. So as far as like a style goes, like I like it. It's kind of fun. It's unique. It's its own thing, and I appreciate that coming from a book that is about being an artist. So I'm very grateful for that. Very easy to read. He's good at writing. As far as a rating goes, I feel like there's some spots in here where I kind of struggle to get my head around it. And I know that you love this book, and I had very, very, very high expectations because you've mentioned it 4 million times. So I was expecting like borderline Viktor Frankl level books here. And I have to admit, it's not at that level, Mike, as much as it's a great book, but I wouldn't put it up there. I really wouldn't. It's got a lot of really great points in it. It's one that I think if you want motivation for starting your own art or beginning to create things of any kind, this is a good one to pick up that you could get through very quickly, that would give you that kind of kick in the pants to get going. It's absolutely gold for that. I know it's done that for me, like putting together this calendar to make sure that I'm holding myself accountable to that recurring pattern is something that could go a very, very long way. So I'm looking forward to that. So as far as the rating goes, I'm going to put it at 4.5. I think it's way up there, but I don't think it's 5.0 standard, Mike. I really don't. So I'm going to put it at 4.5.
All right. It's kind of interesting. I think you think I'm going to rate this at 5.
I kind of feel like you should, just because of how much you talk about it, but I don't know. I don't know what you're going to do now.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. It's at 4.5. It's not Viktor Frankl level. It's unfair to share. It's unfair to compare anything to Viktor Frankl, but
He needs to be like 10.0, and then we just back everything off of that from there.
yeah, that's true. That's true. So this book, as I mentioned, it has been very influential to me over the years, and I think there's still some incredible advice in here. So I was thinking, who is this book for? It is for everyone who thinks that they are creative, and my follow-up argument to that is everyone is creative. So I think maybe some people will see this book and think that that's not for me, but I think it is. And I would say this is one of those books that everyone should read. I also think that it's very easy to read, very interesting visual style. So going all the way back to the beginning, and I was talking about pencil pirates, I feel like Austin Kleon is the poster person for pencil pirates, which is essentially like learn how to visualize your ideas. This is kind of the thing that I want to do. Not probably as many visuals as Austin Kleon has in this book, but the reason this book is so successful is he is a good writer. There's not any fluff in this book, and it's very interesting visually. The visuals help tell the story. And story maybe is the wrong word. Like there's a bunch of different mini sections that are inside of these chapters, these 10 chapters, and they've all got cool visuals that go with them. And like you said, at the end, he's got deleted scenes, he calls them, which is a whole bunch of visuals that he had drawn that he didn't finalize for the production of this book. There's, I don't know, 40, 50 of them.
Right.
So he's living what he's preaching in this book. It's an authentic message from an authentic person, and it's something that anyone could benefit from. You're not going to take it all, but there's going to be something in here that is applicable to you and would improve your life by helping you create. So you don't think that maybe that applies to you as you're listening to this, I would encourage you to rethink that. I think it does. And I think this is a great book that you should buy and read, because it's not going to take you very long, and there's a good chance that something will speak to you from this.
There you go. So you have your action items, team. You have to go buy a book because Mike says so. Ready to go.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, let's put it on the shelf. Mike, what's next?
Next is Things That Matter by Joshua Becker. Joshua Becker is the first person, I believe, to have 3 of their books covered by Bookworm. And I almost didn't pick it because it'd be the 3rd one that we've covered. But this is, if we were to go back and redo Bookworm, this would probably be the one that we would pick.
Very likely. Patrick Lencioni, we've covered 2.
Yep.
I have a 3rd one I've debated putting on the list, but another day. Another day. All right, Things That Matter by Joshua Becker. That'll be fun. That'll be a good one. From what I've heard, this is the one you should read of all his books.
It's also what I have heard, but I have not started it yet.
I haven't either. After that, I am selecting a book which is very recently released called Bittersweet by Susan Cain. If you remember, we covered Quiet by Susan Cain. This is her, it's like Introverts, that world. The tagline on this one is How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. Some accolades from Brene Brown, a whole bunch of people. So kind of looking forward to this one. I'm not sure that I'm excited about this one. But it'll be interesting nonetheless. So it should be good.
All right.
So yeah. Gap books, Mike, what you got?
I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to read Purple Cow by Seth Godin. What inspired this, by the way, was my latest sermon sketch note, because there's a verse that my pastor used about you are a peculiar people. And I thought of the purple cow analogy.
Got it.
So I actually drew a purple cow in my
nice work. That's solid. Nice work.
But then I've realized I never actually read this book. I've understood the people referring to that before. I even heard Seth Godin refer to that when he spoke at the EntreLeadership Summit. But I have not read this book. So I'm going to learn how to transform my business by being remarkable.
That's a good book. I've read that one. It's a good one. It's Seth Godin, though. You can't go wrong with Seth Godin.
That's true.
That's the way it is. As far as a Gap book goes, I know I'm going to have time for one. I'm not sure what it should be yet, because I'm finishing up the one I mentioned earlier and need to get the next one picked. Somebody should tweet a book to me, and I'll...
Digital Zettelkasten.
How to Take Smart Notes, round 2. Is that what I feel like you're going to pick that one here very shortly for Bookworm.
This is the good one. This is the good one. It's really short.
Digital Zettelkasten?
Yep.
Is it actually worthwhile, or are you just trying to get me on the train?
No, so far I'm up to chapter 8, so I'm only about halfway through, but it's a short book, and it's really good.
Okay. Very hesitant. I say that knowing that I'm like slowly getting into this world. I'm very aware of what's going on, and you've been aware of this.
Resistance is useless.
Okay. Maybe. We'll see.
Okay.
Maybe. Okay. Big thanks to all of you who have joined us live. I know we got a couple extra folks in today. Big thanks to you, Silent, especially. Lots of stuff going on in the chat. We've mentioned some things, not all of it, but it's super fun to have folks here when we're recording live. And we kind of made a change in schedule. I think we're trying to do these on Thursdays, somewhere around 2 o'clock or so Central. So if you're interested in joining us live, we'd love to have you join us. If you haven't already, we'd also love to have you as part of our Bookworm membership and join the club there. If you want to do that, you can have our undying gratitude and help us keep the lights on here at bookworm.fm. And you can help us out by going to bookworm.fm/membership. It's $5 a month, $60 a year, your call. The math works out the same, if you didn't know that. And it's super cool. You get access to all of Mike's MindNode files. We talk about this every couple weeks, but you get some cool perks. And especially like the big one is like you get to help us keep the show going. And we're super, super grateful for you who have done that. So thank you to all of our Bookworm Club members.
All right. If you're reading along with us, which you totally should be, pick up Things That Matter by Joshua Becker, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Well done.
We'll see. I was kind of punchy today.
That's good. I like it. Thanks,
We
Blake.
will see.
Thanks, Silent. I assume it's silent. I just like the way you spell it. And
It's
sorry
like
that we
Silent
couldn't.
Wolf.
We don't normally like interact with the chat when we're recording, but it's still fun. I thought so.
Indeed.
I thought so. Thanks for that. Cool, cool. Oh, I gotta run here. Yeah, it's after 4 already. Yep, I gotta run. So,
It
anything
is.
else we need to tell folks, Mike?
No. See you in a couple weeks.
Cool.
Same time, same channel.
Yes. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, team, for joining us. See you in 2 weeks. Bye, all.